And good evening to all of you. This is, of course, the voice of college football, Mark Rogers TV. And we've got the call-in show underway for a Wednesday night. It's 10 o'clock Eastern time. We will be taking your calls. If I can find my phone, there it is. We will be taking your calls for the next hour or so. And if I know any better, you guys will keep me on the line a bit longer than that. So we've got the audio in play as well. So if you're watching me on the video right now on YouTube, evidently that's your preference. But if not, if you like the audio, you can join us at Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. And also there's another one in there that I forget, Spotify, I believe. And just search Mark Rogers TV. Amazon, this is key, folks. If you'd like to support the channel and have nothing come out of your pocket, you can still support the channel. Grab any of the links in any of the description sections, any of the Amazon links. Just enter Amazon, do your regular shopping, buy what you typically would buy. Do not purchase. You don't need to purchase the product that you see there. Just buy whatever your heart desires on Amazon, and that will help support the channel. If you use one of the links that we provide down in the comment section of any of the videos, of all the videos, use that link there to enter Amazon, and you will be supporting Mark Rogers TV. And also, we've got our newsletter, The Voice of College Football. So my many apologies to the voice, to youth out there that have signed up and subscribed to The Voice of College Football. So for 15 weeks, during the entire college football season through the championship games, we were on the money each and every week. We were on target. We were on time, delivering the Voice of College Football newsletter to you each and every Monday. Then we got into the holidays. We also had some challenges to the channel that are continuing right now, but we had some challenges to the channel. It got us off our schedule, in addition, again, to the holidays, since both Christmas Eve, yes, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve both fell on a Monday, and that tripped us up. So we are a bit behind. And now with the national championship game being played on a Monday, I didn't want to deliver the newsletter on a Monday and then have the national championship game be played that night. So I will be working late night tonight and also on Thursday, most likely, and we'll have the Voice of College Football newsletter out to you on Thursday. It may be late on Thursday, but it'll be in your hands on Thursday. So again, if you want stats, facts, and trends that you will not find anywhere else, and also my take and perspective on college football, and also keeping up with the channel, what our vision is, what our updates are, what we are planning for the future, please subscribe to our newsletter, The Voice of College Football. Just send your email address to mine at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and we'll get you out the newsletter each and every Monday, even during the off season. As I mentioned in a few discussions with people tonight and also yesterday, when they say, what are you going to talk about now that college football's over? I said, you know what? There's more to talk about. There is actually more ideas running through this brain right now of ideas on what we will talk about during the off season. For those of you who have not been watching us during the off season in the past, recruiting, National Signing Day, spring practice all over the country. Think about positional units. Think about your favorite team. You're a Penn State fan. We have in the past, during the offseason, done a positional breakdown on, let's say, Penn State football at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, special teams, secondary, coaching staff, for as many teams as we can get to. We have ranked the top 10 at every position in the nation: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, defensive line, safeties, cornerbacks, linebackers, special teams, for every position. And we have ranked at times in previous off seasons the top 5 in every position in every conference. Plus, we're still going to rank the conferences and rate the conferences, the Power Five. So there is plenty to talk about during the off season, and I am going to embark on a series. This is going to be crazy, but I'm going to embark on a series in which I am going to go through every college football season, starting with 2018. And the first several of these aren't going to be that complex because of the college football playoff, but I'm going to say Clemson won the national championship. Did any other team have a right to claim a national championship in this particular season? I don't believe so. So that is going to be my next statement. There is not another team in college football that could claim a national championship this year. Okay, though, we've got a playoff system, and Clemson won the national championship by winning 2 games in the playoffs. Were there any teams that were left out of the playoff that have a legitimate gripe, that have a legitimate resume that's equal to or better than the teams that were in the playoff? I believe that there are 2. Okay, well, those teams can't claim a national championship, but we can at least say that team and that team could have been in the playoff. All right, let's move to 2017. And once we get into the poll era and get into the BCS era, then it gets very complicated. And we will run through all the various scenarios and the situations and what elevated one team to the number 1 position. And maybe there were other teams in play that had just as good a resumes and could have been considered, or back in the poll era, there were, let's say, this team and that team and that team claimed national championships. Well, let's look at this season. Let's look at their record. Let's look at their results. And if they are legitimate and valid in claiming a national championship. I'm going to pick on Alabama, but they are not the only culprits of claiming national championships that are not legitimate national championships. So we are going to expose the frauds. We are going to expose the frauds. Yes, we will. This is maybe too much to take on, but I'm going to do it. Starting with 2018, going through every season in college football history and running through the national champions claimed, and then what actually transpired, and who has a valid gripe, who has a valid point to say, we could claim a national championship, or we could have claimed a college football playoff appearance, or between 1998 and 2013, we could have been in the BCS championship game. We should have been in the BCS championship game. And then those teams that claim a national championship, or maybe won a national championship, or made a college football playoff appearance, or a BCS championship game, that I will make a case for their dismissal. We are going to rewrite college football history right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Hopefully you enjoy that. I will also take your requests. I am here to take your requests as well. I am going to rank the conferences. So what I have done every off season that Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, has existed, I've taken all the results from all the Power 5 games. So all the games played between Power 5 conferences, and I have seeded the conferences, and I have weighted the games appropriately. So Alabama, number 1 in the SEC. Louisville, number 14 in the ACC. That is not simply... So if you go to other channels, if you go to other online articles, you will see just a record of the ACC went 13-12 and the SEC went 14-10, etc. Okay, that doesn't tell us anything. That tells us very little. When Alabama's number 1 in the SEC and they beat Louisville like a drum, and they're the 14th, the very worst team in the ACC, well, yes, you have to give credit to the team and the conference that won and discredit the conference that lost, but about that much. We weight the games based on the seedings. So the Alabama win over Louisville means very little for the SEC over the ACC. Now, the Clemson win over Texas A&M, much more significant, but still the number 1 team in the ACC should defeat what is going to be the 6th or 7th best team in the SEC, but still that's going to be more credited than the Alabama win over Louisville. Let's get to a better example. Auburn, who finished 8-5, 7-5 in the regular season and finished 4-4, I believe, in the SEC. Maybe they must have finished 3-5 in the SEC. So Auburn, a 3-5 team in the SEC. So Alabama, Mississippi State, LSU, Texas A&M, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, even South Carolina are all going to be ranked ahead of and seated higher than Auburn in the SEC. But Auburn played toe-to-toe with Washington, and they beat the Pac-12 champion. So something like the 8 or 9 seed in the SEC won a game against the Pac-12 #1 seed. That is going to weigh heavily in the SEC's favor. Again, that's just one game, but it's still going to weigh heavily in the favor of the SEC. So we're going to do that series as well. On Friday, I am going to go through viewer comments, and here on Wednesday night, we're going to take viewer calls. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Go Tigers! What about them Tigers, boy?
DeAndre! Whoa! How are ya? Woo! How about them Tigers? Woo!
Yes, sir.
All kidding aside, DeAndre, I'm not kidding. That was a phenomenal performance. That was a dominant performance that I did not expect. I don't think you expected. I can't imagine anybody expected because of the great talent at Alabama. But that team just played lights out. So congratulations. You have to be awfully proud.
Yeah. Now, Mark, I give you all the credit. You're right. I didn't expect it. I honestly didn't. But before I did my bets, there's a guy, and you're my favorite analyst on YouTube.
Thank you.
There's people I like, me and, I like Pete, and I like, I forgot the guy name off the top of my head right now. Real crazy guy, cool guy. But there's a guy.
I thought I was the cool guy.
To work with. Yeah, you are cool.
I'm just kidding you, DeAndre. I appreciate it. I'm just kidding. We're talking about Uncle Lou?
No, I don't listen to Uncle Lou.
See, I don't get to watch these guys because I'm doing this all the time. So I don't know these guys. For the most part, I know Uncle Lou and Pigskin. We've talked back and forth, but we've never been able to get him on here. So anyway, finish your story.
There's a guy by the name of Top Dillon. He does. He said he used to work at the SEC sometimes, and he does film study. He doesn't do the 25 thing like you do and all that other stuff, but he does a lot of film work. And he's the only person to say that Clemson will beat Alabama badly.
Wow.
And,
good for him.
Yeah, he was the only person, and he's a Georgia fan. He's not a Clemson fan. He's a Georgia fan.
Wow.
He called it when I placed my bets. I had listened to him because we were talking about film study. He was just saying how, he said his foot speed of Georgia corners were not as good as people were thinking they was, and they were talking about Clemson corner, the one that got the first interception. How everybody was saying that he's going to be a first-round pick.
Okay.
And he was a junior this year because of his size. And he was the only one that said that he thought Clemson was going to beat Alabama. Now, he didn't say he's going to beat them like by 28 points. He just said that he thought Clemson was going to win at least by 10 points. And he was just saying how slow. He said that Tua was a one-read quarterback. I don't know if that's true or not. I watch Alabama games, but a lot of it's flipping back and forth between other teams I want to see.
Yeah.
So I can't really tell you that Tua was a one-read quarterback or not. But he called it, and I sent him a message. I said, man, thank you so much for give me that tip. Because I was going to go with Alabama in the 5 points. I think that's what it was at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I'm so proud of Clemson. And, you know, you don't never hear me say anything bad about Alabama. I thought Alabama, I even heard a lot of analysts say this probably is Alabama's best team. But then when I finally got a chance to watch them play against Clemson, I'm like, Dad, this defense is not as good as some of the other teams that Deshaun Watson had to play, because Deshaun Watson was getting lit up by Alabama. I mean, Deshaun Watson, I don't know how he survived some of those games.
Yeah.
But one of those games, he went up in the air like a helicopter that was hitting him so hard. So the defense wasn't as good as has it been in the past. And I know Nick Saban's going to get that straight. Even the offensive line, I don't know if Alabama, why they stopped running the ball. I mean, I was watching one block by the right tackle. I mean, he body slammed Bryant, the defensive end for Clemson. And I was like, Dad, they were running the ball. I just don't understand why Alabama stopped running the ball.
Exactly.
And yeah, and I think that's what finally got Clemson to run away, because they heard some of the analysts say Nick Saban got away from being Nick Saban. What got Nick Saban's great is good offensive line play, which they had, and a good running game, and play good defense. And you just saw Clemson getting out physical by Alabama early in the game. And I just don't know why they went away from it. But I think you're going to see them go back to it next year instead of letting Tua throw the ball around like they had. But I'm so proud of Clemson. You know, that secondary came to play when Muse gave up that first touchdown. I was like, oh, my God. I mean, when it was 16-14,
yeah.
I honestly think Clemson was going to win the game. Even when it was 28-16, I said, here comes Bama. Bama's going to come back. They're going to do something amazing, make a great comeback. They don't get a sack, fumble, or something like that. But that Clemson offensive line, and I said it earlier in the year when we were talking, if that offensive line will block for Trevor Lawrence, I mean, higher than the boys put on the show. I mean, like I said, I know Alabama wasn't as good as they've been in years past on defense, but I mean, they not giving up one sack. That's just amazing. Now, they gave us a tackle for loss, but even with Goldman, they didn't even run the ball against Alabama any of those times that they played. So I was really shocked.
DeAndre, think about it. So I rewatched the first quarter right after the game. I got home about 3 in the morning. I actually struck up a live stream and I put the game in, and I rewatched the first quarter, and this is what struck me. So think about it. So Tua made the one bad read and threw that awful pass, and it was both a bad read, and it was also the ball wasn't thrown to the sideline. It was underthrown. And Terrell made an exceptional play to break off of his guy and see it coming and pick off the pass. But take away the pick six, which of course you can't, but it's not a play that shows line of scrimmage dominance. It's just a play by a defensive back that was exceptional. So take away that play.
Right.
And then think about the other Clemson touchdown was the big play over the top to T. Higgins. They hit T. Higgins for about 62 yards, and then they had the Etienne run, and it was basically a 2-play drive. They had the play to Higgins, and then Etienne took it in. Okay, so those were the 2 Clemson touchdowns. Alabama had 3 scoring drives, and so they scored the 1 touchdown, then they scored the other touchdown and missed the field goal. And then the third drive, this was pretty much the turning point in the game. They had the third drive in which they had to kick the field goal, and they had 1st and goal at the 1. So those 3 drives, Bama drove the ball 75 yards with no problem. If you rewatch those plays, every time Tua dropped back to pass, he had a clean pocket, a perfectly clean pocket, except for 1 play in 3 drives. Every time they ran the ball, they were picking up 12, 8, 13. They were running the ball down their throats, and the receivers were getting separation. It just looked like perfect offensive football the first 3 drives, except for the pick 6. The other 3 touchdown drives, or would-be touchdown drive on the last one. Then after that, Clemson's defensive line just took control. The defensive back started to hang with the wideouts. It just after that first quarter, there was just a switch that flipped, and Clemson just dominated the rest of the game.
Right.
But that first quarter, Alabama was the better team. They had like 220 yards of total offense to 80 for Clemson.
Right. I mean, even I was listening to one talk show, and I got working 3 jobs. That's sometimes all I had to do was listen to some of the talk shows.
My goodness.
And I said, yeah, and I was like, they even said it. I didn't catch on to it, but Nick Saban even seemed shook at the end of halftime. He was like, well, we're just being outcoached. How many times have you ever heard Nick Saban say that? I mean, like for him to give up, I think it was like, 40 seconds ago with 3 timeouts, and he was like, we're not going to run a play. I just didn't get it. You have one of the best offenses in Alabama history, with one of the best quarterbacks in Alabama history, alleged best quarterbacks in Alabama history. You know, he still got a long way to go. But I was just shocked. I don't know what happened. I mean, it was like, dang, Clemson just beat Alabama by 28 points. Nick Saban. I'm just like, I was in shock. Nobody can tell me outside of top feeling that they thought it was coming. And Bobby Dorkins is the other guy that I talk to sometimes. I listen to his show. He's a Clemson fan. I don't know if you get a chance to listen to him, but he's the other person. But nobody saw this coming. And my whole thing about the SEC, I know we joke around. I'm messing with you about the Big Ten being sorry and stuff like that. But see, my biggest thing that SEC, everybody said they saw these weaknesses in Alabama defense. But Alabama, nobody had the quarterback to take advantage of this situation.
Sure.
Outside of Oklahoma. And that's why I always say, you know, outside of Fromm and Tua, there's no other great quarterbacks. Now, I'm not going to say Finley from NC State or who's another quarterback? The kid out of Duke that's supposed to be a second-round pick.
Daniel Jones.
Yeah. I'm not going to say they're going to do it. They could have done it to Alabama because I don't think they could have. But, I mean, it was just amazing to me that what Clemson did to Alabama. And
well, those other teams were missing something. So what Clemson had was they had the elite quarterback, they had the wideouts that are elite, and then they had the offensive line play. So if you take any of the teams that you just mentioned, they're missing something in there. Like Washington State, they throw the ball really well, but I don't know that their offensive line could hold up. And I don't know that their receivers could get separation on a consistent basis. The quarterback's really good. Minshew. Ohio State, maybe, but they would have their issues on the other side of the ball. Maybe a Penn State a couple of years ago. This Penn State offense couldn't have done it. We saw what Oklahoma, once they got on track. So here are the two things that maybe I should have taken my cue on that I thought about, DeAndre, before picking this game that almost made me pick Clemson. One was that Alabama defense, sure, they came out strong against Oklahoma, but once Oklahoma got into its rhythm and they got used to playing that physical of a team, that Alabama defense was gassed the rest of the game. They were just worn out and getting run all over the place. And the second thing was, I thought, you know what? We make fun of Notre Dame, and people make fun of Notre Dame, and I'll take this other call in just a second. People make fun of Notre Dame, but they're not a bad football team. They are a top 10 to 12 football team. They're a very good football team. They're not explosive like Clemson, but they hung in that game until about 5 minutes left in the first half. And I'm thinking, if Clemson could do that to Notre Dame, maybe they are that good. So those were the two things that made me think maybe Clemson will win this game. But I wrote down my concerns for each team, and it just seemed like Clemson's concerns were just more obvious with, the concerns that people had with the secondary and with the offensive line holding up. And so those were the two things that really just made me, and I picked Alabama to win by a touchdown.
Yeah, and before I let you go, two other things. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but they say Clemson even practice. I mean, I know they practice for Notre Dame, But I don't know if you heard the joke that Clemson prepared the whole month of December for Alabama. And Alabama had to prepare for Clemson for a week because Oklahoma defense was, Alabama had to get their defense ready for Oklahoma, who has a great offense.
Would not surprise me.
And then that thing about their secondary, it's hard to say. It was the safeties that we saw with views, but it just like, okay, Bentley threw for 530 yards. I mean, he had something to prove because Clemson had destroyed them the last 2 years before this game. I mean, Debo Samuel, whatever his name is, Debo is going to be a first-round pick, probably. He had a lot of injuries. He didn't play last year, so he wanted to come out and prove something. I mean, again, Clemson, I know Duke is not great, but Clemson had to play the Duke before they played South Carolina, and South Carolina had to play, I don't know who they played in their cupcake week of SEC. So
gotcha.
We don't know if South Carolina said, okay, we're going to spend 2 weeks. But, I mean, the boy at top billing, he even called it. He was like, if you look at what Clemson does, they're exposed to where Clemson plays their safeties. And I know some guys were like, hey, y'all got to remember Lamar didn't play, so the safeties might have been playing out of position some because they had to help stop the run, which I don't think South Carolina had a great running back. I don't remember him being any good, but, so they had to come up and help stop the run and just showing the angles of that slot receiver.
Yep.
Getting on Muse or what's the other guy name? I think it's Wiggins. And they showed how they ran a slant. They had all this open space. So it was easy for South Carolina just to throw the ball there. And I think that's what got Muse the other day. Is like, I'm in an open space with no help against the guy that was the best receiver in the country this past year.
All right.
And somehow Clemson changed it.
Yep.
All right, Mark.
Thanks, DeAndre. I appreciate it. Congratulations again.
Yes, sir.
We'll talk to you soon.
Have a great night, Mark.
You too. That's my man DeAndre, who follows me on Twitter. We have some lively discussion over there, and we kid each other. And I'm glad that he knows well enough that most of the time when I shoot back at him, I really don't mean it. I'm just trying to push a button or two, and it sometimes works. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
This is Deep Barat. How's it going?
Deep Barat. How are you?
Lovely.
Thanks for the support tonight. I appreciate it. You getting online and trying to drive up the likes for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to get your opinion on guys leaving for the draft very early, let's say after 3 years. At least we at Texas, as you know, a huge Texas fan, we just lost L.J. Humphrey, who was like our big wide receiver, very physical guy. Really and truly kind of, I don't want to say he won the game for us, but basically he was a big part in our win against Georgia. So we lost him, and all of a sudden, into the next year, we're thinking of probably starting 2 freshmen, one of which is the Gatorade Player of the Year, Jake Smith. I don't know if you've been following recruiting that much, particularly on the Texas side, but also we have Jordan Whittington. But, interestingly enough, a lot of these people graded him as like a, later round draft pick, or they didn't really want, they advised him to stay in school. And so, it brings up kind of like a dilemma here, right? One is do you think that guys genuinely should, leave without getting, a formalized degree if they're already meant to stay for 3 years? And then 2, kind of what happens if you're undrafted, right? I mean, at least in the NCAA basketball, you can kind of come back if you go undrafted, but I don't think that rule is there for college football. And then that brings up another very interesting point too, right? Because if you look at the national championship game, We had, Trevor Lawrence, who was just killing it, right? I mean, from the start to finish. And a lot of people say he's like NFL ready already. And, this kid is just a freshman, right? And he has to stay 2 more years. So just want to get your perspective on that and kind of go from there.
So my perspective out of the gate is, as an American, we believe in, once you're adult, you make your own decisions. So if we're going to blindly go by that tenet, then we should allow anyone who's over the age of 18 to make their own decisions professionally and move on to the NFL if they so choose, regardless of their physical well-being or anything else. But that's taking that freedom to an extreme, and I don't completely believe in that for the well-being of those that maybe can't make a wise decision on their own. In terms of the player make,
Hello?
yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, like, if you just look at, like, Trevor Lawrence's, like, 24/7 rating, too, right? I mean, he was the highest rated, what do you call, high school recruit in the history of recruiting. I mean, he was given, like, a perfect 1.00 out of, 1.00, which typically, like, never happens, right? Now, I'm not trying to say he's, like, the next LeBron James or, but and at the same time, it could lose a lot of interest in people who follow college sports if the best talent out of high school goes immediately to the pros, or even 1 year out of high school, right? I mean, a lot of these kids in professional basketball, I mean, they leave, 1 year out, maybe 2 years out max, which I don't know what that would do. I mean, I'm a huge college fan, but if we lose the best talent, I mean, am I going to be as passionate about the game all of a sudden? I mean, that's another thing that I wanted to hear your thoughts on.
So if we went to that extreme and we treated this entry into the professional work world like we do any other, then of course these individuals would have the choice to go to college, or to go to college just for a year or two, or not go to college. And if they're really that good, then the NFL would be able to draft them. I don't want it to go in that direction, but I'm just saying, if you take our freedoms as Americans, as adults in any other profession, and you take that to that degree, then that's would be the structure of the situation. That would be the format in which we would live. I'm trying to think, what other direction did you want me to take this? Is it good for the game? No, it's not good for the game that the best talent is leaving for the NFL. The one thing in play, though, you mentioned if a kid makes a mistake, and that's one of the reasons why they put and I'm forgetting the terminology, but they put the scouting portion of this in place several years ago, in which every player is able to get a draft grade back from NFL scouts that is supposed to be very accurate in determining and letting them know what their draft status is going to be, so that they're not going into that situation completely blind and just listening to the yes men who want to tell them, come out because you're ready to go and I can make some money off of you. They're actually making an informed decision based on the draft grade. So there is that in play.
Yeah, and I completely kind of see where you're going with. But it's just, and I think you've been a college football fan much longer than I have. And so,
why do I look it?
Man, like, I mean, I think you're older than 25. I mean, no disrespect.
A bit.
I think you.
Just a bit.
What I was going to say is, as a college football fan, a lot of the guys who we look up to as stars, right? Guys who we love to see every Saturday or Friday if your game is scheduled on that day, they have to leave, and they have to leave after 3 years, or some of them leave after 4 years. Some of them we don't see, right? I mean, a lot of these guys get redshirted for a year, and you only see them for a year, like Dwayne Haskins, right?
Mm-hmm.
He redshirted, I think, for 2 years until he becomes a superstar, and all of a sudden, Ohio State loses their star QB. and gets a new one, but you know what I'm saying. Speaking of which, I just wanted to transition and ask you another question as well, which do you believe, and I know you're a big Ohio State fan, do you believe that Justin Fields is going to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State next year, based on what you've seen from Tate Martell and some of the other guys as well?
Well, just to make one more point for your first topic, that's what's destroyed college basketball, is that back in the day that I watched college basketball back in the 80s and 90s, you would get very acquainted with a basketball team. Even the really good elite teams would keep their players for 3 to 4 years, for the most part, 4 years. And you would be so accustomed to knowing the players on all these teams that I thought that there was an attachment there that's been completely broken because of what you just stated. The best players move on after a year or 2 years to the NBA. And now that has taken hold in college football, but there are more players on the field, obviously, so there's not going to be as many that are going to make that decision. Plus, there's the rules that are in play that have to be abided by. So there's going to be less impact on the game in that direction, but there's still going to be impact, I think, where people are grow a bit tired of seeing these guys play for just a year and then move on, or just play a year after the red shirt or sitting on the bench and then they move on.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're like a big basketball fan or anything, right? But I mean, there's like this kid at Duke, right? Zion Williams.
Sure.
That guy's a beast, but he's leaving after 1 year. He's going to the draft. And so all of a sudden, right, I mean, and college basketball has a huge following too. I mean, especially if you go to a basketball-related school or live in that area, right? Duke, Kansas particularly is a huge basketball state. Kentucky, Gonzaga, etc. But you would lose a lot of its charm in college football if we just lose all of these guys after 1 or 2 years. Which, speaking of which, do you think? And I think this is also another good thing, is that because we lose these kids after 3 years or less, typically 3 years. I mean, redshirted guys still stay for the course of 3 years. They just have to sit on the bench. Do you believe that a lot of these, or not believe, but I mean, well, one, yeah, do you believe that the Justin Fields is like a impressive quarterbacks than some of the other guys that are in Ohio State right now?
So there's no way for me to go based on watching spring games, which I have with Justin Fields on the field and with Tate Martell. So I have seen the spring games for both Ohio State and Georgia with both of those quarterbacks. And number one, I'm not a scout. Number two, I'm not a coach, but I watched a ton of football and I played a little bit of football. But basically, I've watched football for a long time. And obviously, this is what we do here. We watch football and we learn, and we learn from the experts. And I would consider myself an expert in other areas of what we talk about, but not the actual scouting of the players. So watching those two in real game action with live bullets coming at them, I think I could make a fair assessment. But all they've played that's meaningful are in the spring games. Even the Justin Fields playing time for Georgia this season was greatly compromised by them not allowing him to do anything in the passing game. But based on what I hear, based on the scouting reports, based on what elevated Justin Fields to the #1 spot coming out of high school, is similar to what we saw with Trevor Lawrence the other night, is that he's supposed to be just a gifted athlete, maybe from a skill set standpoint, somewhere between Kyler Murray and Trevor Lawrence in regards to run-pass ratio and strengths. Not the runner Murray is, but a better runner than Lawrence and somebody who can do both. So he's supposed to be a generational kind of talent. That's what we've been told, but we haven't seen it on display in meaningful minutes, number one, and number two, with the full array of the playbook. So I can't really answer that question, but I would think, based on everything we've been told, that Justin Fields should win that job at Ohio State.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think it's too early to really say, but based on what a lot of people are saying, I do believe that Fields is the favorite, quote unquote. Speaking of which, the favorite conference that everyone was talking about, the SEC, they performed pretty much below par this year in the what do you call, bowl season. below par. Obviously, the Big 12, and I'm very happy because I'm a Texas fan, right? They went 3-1 versus the SEC this year, being the number 2 SEC team. And the ACC beat the SEC in the most important game of the year with Clemson defeating Alabama. So, I don't know if that changed your thoughts, but I would assume that you probably still think maybe the SEC is still the best conference in America. But I mean, heading into next year too, I mean, a lot of these SEC teams that people have hyped up look a little bit vulnerable. Particularly, I mean, I guess Georgia will rebound because they just have the number 1 recruiting class, or number 2 this year. But the SEC is no longer as invincible as people put it out to be. Is the perception that I got from bowl season this year, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
All right, Deep Barrett, I will answer that. I'm going to let you go and take some other calls, but I will certainly explain my thoughts on the SEC against the other 4 conferences. Thanks for calling, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a nice day.
All right. So here's my thoughts on the SEC and the other Power 5 conferences. My thought is, let's put the results and the performance to the side for just a second. Of course, that's most important, but the sheer talent in the SEC tells us that it's probably the best conference. Again, we'll get to the results because they're most important. The SEC recruits the best players. It's not even close with the other leagues. If you look at the recruiting rankings over and over and over, again, the recruiting rankings are flawed if you look at any one particular player, but in mass, they are very telling because the recruiting rankings translate 3 to 4 years later right into the NFL draft. The SEC by far has the most players drafted into the NFL, and by far recruits and has the most top 300 players signed by SEC teams. That can't be debated. Now, whether that is manifested on the field, well, let's take a look. I am going to provide a complete breakdown of the results between the Power 5 leagues as I do each and every offseason. But for right now, Deep Barrett makes a good point about the Big 12's performance against the SEC in bowl play. And I think bowl play, more so than other people, is a pretty substantial barometer. Yes, there are more guys sitting out than ever before. But if you look at those players versus the overall amount of personnel on each team, it's pretty minuscule. There are some exceptions. Michigan had a big drain on its team with Karan Higdon and Devin Bush and Rashawn Gary not playing for Michigan against Florida. It doesn't excuse the loss, but it can be understood. It can be put in a different context. I don't know what to do with that game in particular because you're talking about a 1,000-yard rusher, the best defensive lineman in the conference, and probably one of the top 2 or 3 linebackers in the country. So that's difficult to deal with in the Michigan scenario against Florida. This is a program that trounced Florida twice in the last 3 years, and then they lose 41-15 without 6 of their best players. But other than that, when the teams are healthy or near healthy, think about this. In the regular season, the Power 5 conferences play regular season games against each other that were scheduled 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 years ago. So therefore, we very rarely have like-seeded matchups. It was nice in 2016 and 17 to see Ohio State, the best team in the Big 10, play Oklahoma, the best team in the Big 12. And what happened? Well, Ohio State went to Norman and blew the doors off them. Oklahoma won decidedly in Columbus the next year. So at least we got to see number 1 seeds in 2 conferences play each other, and we could make a reasonable conclusion out of that series. Because most of the time, because we don't know, and this is what's wrong with scheduling in college football, that it's left up to the schools, who was Oklahoma's major non-conference game? Well, it turned out to be Army, actually, but based on face value and brand and conference affiliation, it was UCLA. That was Oklahoma's big matchup this year. Well, there's no way to compare the Pac-12 and the Big 12 based on that game. It means nothing in regards to what we're talking about here, and that's comparing conferences. That's why bowl season is so beautiful, among other things, is that it provides at least an arena, at least a portion of games that we can draw some level of conclusion because all the teams are like seeded. Now, it doesn't work out perfectly because sometimes, especially those teams that are those conferences that have teams that elevate into the college football playoff, and especially in the old BCS, you had the Big Ten and the SEC with way more teams elevated into the major bowls, and over the last few years into the New Year's Six than the other conferences, and then therefore they had their lower seeded teams playing higher seeded, but not by much, by 1 or 2 spots. So to Deep Barrett's point, the Big 12 with like seeded teams going up against the SEC won 3 of 4 games. We don't even get that kind of comparison on the last weekend of the season when 4 ACC teams play 4 SEC teams. Louisville, Kentucky, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, South Carolina, Clemson. Because what do we have? We've got Clemson, by far the best team in the ACC, playing South Carolina, who, let's say, was the 8th or 9th best team in the SEC. Well, you can't draw a conclusion from that game. And then you've got Kentucky, who's actually this year one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the SEC, playing Louisville, who is by far the worst team in the ACC. So we can't draw a conclusion from that game. Georgia, the 2nd or 3rd best team in the SEC, playing Georgia Tech, who's not bad, 7-5, but they lost to Minnesota in a bowl game. They're not that good, 7-6. So we can't make anything out of that game. All the games meant nothing in terms of trying to extract a conclusion of conference dominance or power. But the bowl games give that to us. When Oklahoma State plays Missouri, they're very like-seeded teams in both of those conferences. Obviously, when Alabama and Oklahoma played, that was the best team in the SEC going up against the best team in the Big 12. The other matchups, Vandy and Baylor, very like-seeded teams, both went 6-6. And the other game that I'm missing would have been Texas, Georgia, of course. Texas and Georgia. Texas lost its conference championship game. Georgia lost the SEC championship game. Perfect matchup. Was Georgia motivated? Did they care to be there? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not going to conjecture. That's too bad for them. They should have shown up. They're athletes. They're competitors. If there's a game to be played, especially when millions and millions and millions and millions of people are watching, and it's at the Sugar Bowl and people are going to remember that game, you know what? Don't make excuses. Show up and play. Show that you're a competitor. So the Big 12 showed out against the SEC. There is no doubt about that in those 4 games, but it's a very limited sample. Very limited sample. We did, I believe, have 2 other games between the conferences. I can think of 3 more. West Virginia beat Tennessee. Well, West Virginia was one of the very best teams in the Big 12, probably number 2 or 3. I know they didn't get to the championship game, but they did beat Texas. So the 2nd or 3rd best team in the Big 12 beat Tennessee, who was near the bottom of the SEC. So we can't draw much from that game. Ole Miss and Texas Tech, pretty like-seeded matchup there. Ole Miss blew their doors off, so that brings the SEC up into the conversation a little bit more. Then the other game, of course, was Mississippi State against Kansas State. Not a fair matchup there, with Kansas State having an off year at 5-7, Mississippi State 8-4. It's a fun conversation. I love it. I think it means something. It certainly means something to SEC fans. I don't know that the other conferences have fan bases that are quite as unified. We don't hear folks chanting Big 10 or Big 12 or Pac-12. It just doesn't roll off the lips either. But ACC, they could chant ACC, but we only hear chants for the SEC. Off the top of my head, do not hold me to this. Off the top of my head, I would go SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Man, I think the ACC is pretty bad. ACC, Pac-12. Is somebody going to rise up in the next few years and challenge Clemson in the ACC? It's reasonable to think that somebody will in the SEC. Jimbo Fisher's at Texas A&M recruiting out of his mind. LSU is LSU. Auburn is usually strong. On the other side, Georgia, Florida. Dan Mullen's doing a nice job at Florida. Kentucky, not necessarily what I think that they're going to challenge Alabama, but they'll be somewhat strong, you would think. Mark Stoops has something going there. That there's just so many strong programs in the SEC. You look at the ACC, I see nothing past Clemson. Who else has a good program right this second? Well, Florida State, I believe, will Lee. Even if he's not the guy, they'll get rid of him. If he goes 5-7 again, he might be gone next year. Or let's say a 7-5 and a 7-5 the next 2 years might get him out the door, and then they'll get somebody that they need. And I'm not saying that Willie Taggart's not the guy at Florida State. I'm just saying, considering the first year that he had there, if he's not the guy, then it's not going to take more than 2 years for him to be out the door. And Florida State, as we well know, they are the most prepared in terms of tradition, talent, recruiting base more than anything, resources, money, everything involved, facilities, the most equipped to challenge Clemson long term. But they're 59-10 eons away from Clemson right now. So who in the world in the ACC is going to challenge Clemson? Whereas Alabama, I can see being challenged by all those schools that I just mentioned, especially LSU, Texas A&M, and Auburn. And then by extension in the championship game, Florida and Georgia. At least there's 5 schools in the SEC that you don't have to make a huge stretch to say they could challenge Bama in the next 2 to 3 years. In the ACC, I would put my money on Florida State just because of the obvious advantages that that program has, but they're not the closest right now. Who's the closest? Nobody's even close. Yeah, Syracuse played them close on one Saturday afternoon without Trevor Lawrence on the field in the second half, but they are not close. Nobody's close. Pitt won the other division. All right. I will put the number in the live chat, 860-325-3687. And I did promise a better call-in system once we hit the off season, didn't I? All right. We will hopefully have the flexibility and the freedom to address that if we can get through a few issues. Excuse me. I need some water and some dinner. So we're going to make it through this live stream. I want to address anybody who has anything for me in the live chat. Tonight, I spoke with Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast, so that's coming your way. Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, that's coming your way, as well as Miami Talk with Cam Underwood. That's all coming your way here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Some of those have already been released, and I will release those videos throughout the day on Thursday and Friday. I want to remind you that I believe, and I might be completely ignorant about this, somebody please check me on this. I believe that the super chat is available for you to contribute to MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. So I just told DeAndre a few minutes ago that I don't see these other guys on YouTube. I guess the exceptions would be Alonzo1219, and I don't sit there and watch him, unfortunately, and that's no knock against him. I love Alonzo, but I just don't have the time to watch all these other guys. I basically do this myself, and then when I do have the time, I'm working on videos and I'm reading college football content and looking at stats and trying to raise my knowledge and just trying to keep up. So I don't really listen to anyone else. But I do notice with Zoe, and I notice with Uncle Lou, who I will catch for 5 or 10 minutes once a month, that they institute the live chat, they institute the super chat, and they get quite a response. So I would hope that we would be able to do the same here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And if I was at liberty to explain my situation, you might be more apt to try to keep this going. So I appreciate that. Beast Mode wants us to talk about Minnesota's future. Minnesota has 2 major items going for it. Number one, that guy on the sideline, PJ Fleck. He's a ball of energy and he can recruit. That is evident. And he can coach. He already did it in the MAC. He turned around a 1-win program and turned them into, by far, the best team in the MAC. To go to a Cotton Bowl undefeated, to go to the Cotton Bowl at Western Michigan. Think about that. Western Michigan went to the Cotton Bowl and were undefeated, and they only lost by 1 score to Wisconsin. All right, that guy. And also because of him demanding this and making sure that this was in place when he was hired at Minnesota, they have a grand facility, and I am losing my voice, grand facility on its way in Minneapolis. I don't know how close it is to completion. Maybe it is complete, but it's beautiful. I've seen the draw-ups. I saw a story on the Big Ten Network about it. It's beautiful. It's tough to get kids up there, but that will help. His enthusiasm and that facility will help them raise some of those players from Texas in particular, Florida, and other places, in addition to they've got to keep the best players in Minnesota there in state. And that's not significant, but it is somewhat meaningful because they do play some decent football in the state of Minnesota. They need to keep the top. They need to keep 2/3 of the top 10 to 12 to 15 players in the state, and then go out and grab the rest of the guys out of Texas and Florida and elsewhere. And Ohio, if you go through Big Ten rosters and you go through MAC rosters, so we're talking about Big Ten upper echelon recruits, and then we're talking MAC, we know where they slot, somewhere in that Sun Belt Conference USA range, that the high school football players out of the state of Ohio litter the Big Ten and MAC rosters more than any other state by far in the Midwest. It's not even close. So Minnesota has to go to Ohio as well and get those players, but mostly lock down the state of Minnesota, get into Ohio. Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin should supply Minnesota with some players, but then Texas and Florida. The quarterback situation I was not impressed with last year, although just to continue my Minnesota analysis, beast mode, this Tanner Morgan, at least based on his play the last 4 or 5 games and in the bowl game. So I saw the bowl game, every play against Georgia Tech, and it was mighty impressive. The running game was devastating with Mohammed Abraham. Yes, that's his name, Mohammed Abraham. Owen asking about the Mountaineers and Neil Brown. I hear good things about Neil Brown, who obviously did a bang-up job at the group of 5 level. Can he make a run at Jalen? How Jalen Hurts' stock has risen with the slim demise, I'm not going to overstate it, but the bit of a slump, or actually to the point where we know that Tua's human in recent weeks. And of course, Jalen took over the SEC championship game and won the game, that people are actually interested in Jalen Hurts now. So we've got a phone call coming in. Thank you, George, for reminding people to hit the like button. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do we have on the line?
All right, man. Davey Thomas.
There he is.
I'm going to blow up your world tonight.
Oh, boy.
All right, let's talk about this Justin Fields transfer
Okay.
to Ohio State.
Yep.
How is he going to be eligible in 2019 to play for the Buckeyes?
I wish I had the criteria.
I know it's gonna go through an NCAA appeal.
Yes.
But it looks to me like he's pulling the race card, and I don't remember when the race card came into eligibility. I just wanted to see if I could get a take on you.
So there are 5 criteria, 5 bullet points, and I just read these a few weeks ago. I wish I had them in front of me. And it would not appear as though Justin Fields is eligible for any of that. There are no kind of hardships. There's not an NCAA investigation going on at Georgia. Those are 2 stipulations. And you don't need all 5. You just need one of the 5. But what is key in that is that, as I understand it, he just needs the University of Georgia to sign off and release him. And it's become that easy.
Oh, and the other point I wanted to throw out there is his sister is enrolled at the University of Georgia
to
play softball. So I'm having a hard time thinking racism, whatever it is going to make him eligible through the NCAA if his sister stays at Georgia.
So why are you bringing race? What did you read that went that direction?
Baseball player at Georgia yelled some racial slurs at Fields.
So he is supposedly claiming that it's a hostile environment and he's being targeted and he needs to leave.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't hear that. You're way ahead of me. Navy Thomas is throwing me leads all day, and unfortunately I'm grinding away at work and can't jump on most of them, but interesting. I don't know that.
I just, like I said, I just wanted to throw that at you, and maybe that'll pique your interest and you can look into it, and I'm interested in what you can find out.
I think that these high-level athletes, I think we've gotten to a point with these high-level athletes that it's kind of being wink, wink understood that, you know what, that if, this kid's going to make himself and a lot of people a lot of money in a couple years, and it's good for the game for him to go to another high-profile university because he can't play where he's come from. He can't land a starting spot, but it's going to be good for him to land like a Shea Patterson at a high profile place. So you know what? Let's just all agree that we're going to let these kids just go wherever they want. And this has been the trend as of the last few years. These kids have not had to sit out. Now, there hasn't been a whole lot of them. Most of them are graduate transfers, which is a different story. But if I had to lay money, I wouldn't lay money on this, but if I had to, I would say that Justin Fields is going to be eligible in 2019.
I just can't buy it, my friend. All right, I just wanted, like I said, I wanted to throw that out there, pique your interest, and see if you can dig up any dirt or info on it.
All right, Navy, I appreciate it. Based on the series that I just announced a few minutes ago and what I'm going to be doing to work on that thing, I don't know that I'm going to be working on much else, but I'm betting on you to dig up more than I will, and you can send it my way, and then I'll let you know what I think.
Oh, I'm always digging. You know me.
I know you are. You come up with some good stuff.
All right, bro. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Have a good one. All right, we've got somebody else on the line. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's George. How you doing?
Hey, George. How are you?
I'm doing good, Mark. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
I see you're doing some work for me on the live chat.
Well, every once in a while I get a minute, you know. I do what I can.
What have you been doing otherwise?
Well, I talked to your viewers behind the scenes, and we want to put you up against Trump next year. Do you think you're up for it?
Oh, wouldn't that be a fun debate? I would love that.
I know. You would give us the top 25 reasons to not build a wall, you know?
Well, it
would be fun.
What was so amusing, if it wasn't so serious, then it would be even more amusing. What was so fun about watching the Republican debates, and I'm not going to go off on this too much because I try to stay out of that mess.
I know. Same here. I'm just playing around.
And I definitely have my political views, and they may not be exactly what you think they are. But anyway, to look at that those Republican debates, it was always just uncanny how Trump could just talk all of them just under their platform by just sheer volume and just sheer intimidation. And I would be thinking, why don't you say this? And why don't you say that, Jeb Bush, or whoever it was? Not that I was rooting for Jeb Bush, but can't you defend yourself?
Any simple man.
Yes.
Any simple man off the street could answer. Yeah.
It was amusing. Again, if it wasn't so important, it would have been more amusing.
Listen, it's all scripted by Steven Spielberg, but that's another discussion.
Okay.
That's kind of subject.
Yeah, what's on your mind, George?
Yeah, that's right up there with the moon landing. Well, I don't know. I've seen what you're seeing. I'm thinking next year, what do you think? Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, one other team might get in.
It would be.
Damn, you got Justin Fields, huh?
Yes, Justin Fields. We'll see if he's
going to be on fire.
Let's see if he's going to live up to it.
That's the #1 quarterback with a year of training at Georgia. You're so lucky.
Well, your team's looking pretty good. So yeah, everybody's going to throw.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it.
Everybody's going to throw out the typical teams. It's all going to be Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, etc. As usual, for the next several months, I'm going to be trying to dig to find who could be the team that nobody expects. Obviously, it's not going to be Kansas State or somebody like that, but
I would say Oklahoma, Washington, or Oregon. However,
yep,
it's the same every year. They get 11 wins, and then bam, you meet a real team, a real serious semi-pro team. You know?
Yeah. Well, Oregon, they're an interesting choice with an easy schedule and with the quarterback Justin Herbert coming back.
The power of Phil Knight. His arm reaches anywhere it wants to. He's like, you know what? I think I just want you to stay here for a year. He's like, oh, yes, sir. I'll stay here. I'll just stay in college for another year instead of going #1 in the draft. Yeah.
Yep. Plus, they picked up the #1 college high school football player.
And he'll get the tennis shoe contract later, so it's all good.
That's right. That's right.
I know.
All right.
All right. It's great to be a Gator. And I have high hopes for Miami. If Miami can just pick off a couple teams next year and get through their difficult troubles and struggle for a year and still do half decent, right? And then get some good recruits and then struggle for another year and get some good recruits, it could all be okay because I know those guys care more than anybody. They follow your channel more. They're just all over the internet. I love Miami, don't you?
George, in honor of you, I have moved, while you were talking, I moved Florida up to the first row of the helmet section. They are front and center, right in the middle.
You should. You should. It's the logo, it's the colors, it's uniforms, the stadium, the city, the town. It's good shit. If you have personal bodyguards, I mean.
All right, George, we appreciate the call. I got some other people calling.
Don't go wandering around Gainesville by yourself.
It's been a while since I've been in Gainesville, but
I'm just teasing you, man. But I'm from down there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, maybe we could meet there someday. According to what
right out back of Krispy Kreme's a bad space.
All right, George. Thanks, man.
All right, I love you guys.
You're the best,
Go
George.
Ohio State. Go Mark Rogers, the voice of college football.
Woo! Love it.
Woo!
So George has commented to my channel more than anybody. We don't need to take account. There is no disputing that. DeAndre has just donated $2 to Mark Rogers TV. DeAndre, you are working 3 jobs. Thank you so much for donating to Mark Rogers TV. That's exceptional. Thank you so much, DeAndre. So what I forgot to mention to DeAndre, although I did tweet this to you, DeAndre, today was, it hit me, why don't we have a Clemson live stream? And what I would do was all the big Clemson supporters of Mark Rogers TV. So we got DeAndre, we've got Clemson alum 98, and I don't know who else, because sometimes I lose. I apologize, but with a lot of you that aren't, it's not obvious who you root for, I forget, because fortunately we are gaining steam. We are gaining traction quite a bit. So get this, over the first 4 days of last year, I picked up all of 17 subscribers. In the first 4 days of this year, I picked up 288 subscribers. So I'm gaining traction. So what I'm leading to there is that many of you, even though I recognize your handle and we trade comments, I don't always remember who all of you root for. So I would love to do a Clemson live stream and bring on a bunch of Clemson fans who watch me on a regular basis and bring you on actually to be able to see you, and we'll talk Clemson football and just celebrate your big win. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McGee Sports 4.
All right, what's going on tonight?
Hey, so basically I'm just calling in. I noticed you got over 7,000 subscribers, so I just want to congratulate you on that. I just noticed that.
Thank you.
So congrats. Basically, just recapping the season, I was stunned on Monday. Like, I couldn't believe what happened on Monday night, that game. Like, I did not see that coming from a mile away.
Few did, if any.
Yeah, like, I was just, like, at the end of the third quarter, it was over. I was just like, man. So, but you remember when I called in and said that there should be a 16 playoff?
6, yes.
I have criteria, but I'm not going to share it tonight, but I do have the criteria.
Okay.
And I'm going to share it soon, but just to warn you. But
because if I remember, if I recall our phone call, I had some pretty good ammunition against your 16 playoff.
Correct.
And I asked you to go organize a system and come back if you fully believed that we should have a 16 playoff, and it sounds like you've done that. Great.
Yeah, I did, but I'm going to share it. I just don't feel like sharing it right now because I'll have to like prepare, obviously. But,
absolutely.
But I have the criteria. So, but anyways, Jalen Hurts, third. Maryland has, according to Vegas odds, Maryland is number 3, 400 to 1. When you think of Jalen Hurts to Maryland, he has the connection. The new head coach of Maryland, Loxley. What do you think Jalen Hurts in a Terps uniform?
So they run the style offense. Not that Loxley has to run the style offense that they've been using, but they have a lot of speed at Maryland. They do have a lot of speed at Maryland at the skill position players, and they've got Booger McFarland's kid playing running back who had that monster game against Ohio State.
I know. I was fired up for that. I'm a Terps fan, by the way. That's why I'm asking.
You're a Terps fan?
Yeah, Terps fan.
All right.
Terps, go Terps. Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
How did you become a Maryland fan?
I live in Maryland, family, Maryland fans, so just went along with being a Terps fan, basically. So, yeah, just repping the home state. I think we have a good shot to make a bowl game next year, by the way. Last year we just missed it. That really upset me against Ohio State because we can't even score against Penn State. So I'm just hoping to make a bowl game. I think we have a good shot to make a bowl game, like 6-6, maybe even 7-5, possibly. What do you think about that?
Well, if you look at the recruiting rankings, as you well know, DJ Durkin did a fine. Well, no, DJ Durkin this year, yes.
I'm saying this year.
But DJ Durkin did a fine job for back-to-back years. He had classes ranked between 15 and 25 of the nation. So those kids are going to be sophomores and juniors. So you've got at least half a roster that's made up of kids that should be competitive in the Big Ten.
Yeah, the problem is we got Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan.
Sure you do.
So, which is always tough, but I mean, it would be nice to see Maryland maybe knock off one of those teams. And I know we beat Penn State back when they were in transition mode after the whole scandal. I don't think we ever beat Ohio State, and I don't think we ever beat Michigan. We were close last year to Ohio State if the tight end and
very close. Yes.
Yeah, his name escapes me. But
you beat Michigan, I believe the season before Harbaugh took over in 2014. You won in Ann Arbor, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I wasn't as big on college football back then, but we might have.
Way back then?
Kind of transition for a year or two as well.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I just hope Maryland makes a bowl game next year. If we get Jalen Hurts, we're definitely going bowling, in my opinion. So, we'll see what happens. But I just want to call in, get your perspective about Jalen Hurts. He has the third best chance to go to Maryland according to Vegas. It's like a 400-1 odds, and I think Houston and someone else is ahead of Hurts.
Throw $10 at it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but have a good one, Mark.
All right, man.
I like the show, so
I appreciate that. Thanks for calling in. All right, you have a good one. We'll talk to you soon. All right, I wanted to say hi to Cheryl in particular in the live chat because she believes that she's the only female in the chat, which she probably is. We often have Terry Ann in the chat as well. So, Cheryl, what you need to do is you need to bring a lot of female perspective into the chat and help us out here with the fair sex joining us here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right, who's on the line?
Oh, this is James.
Hey, James. How are you?
Yeah, I wanted to, you had made a video the other day, and I wanted to comment on that when you was talking about Ohio State. And you mentioned something about Ohio State's schedule.
For next year?
Yes, and you was talking about...
It's awful.
You made a comment about the... I understand that, but you don't ever talk about the SEC schedule when they play those,
wait, whoa. Hey, James. How long have you been watching me?
I've been watching you for, I'd say, about a month now.
Okay, for a month. Believe me, James, I have ripped and torn to shreds SEC schedules. So what I do every off season, James, and I'm going to do it earlier this year than I've done it in the past. I usually wait too long and I'm cramming them all in. I go through everybody's schedule and I rank them. I make comparisons between every schedule in the country, all the Power 5, 68 teams, and I rank them. So what I have ripped on the SEC about scheduling has been the obvious. Number one, they don't travel anywhere. And when I say they, I don't mean everyone, but almost everyone doesn't travel. They play too many neutral games, neutral site games. They play we'll take Alabama, for example. This schedule that they put together for last year was abysmal. Louisville was awful. Now, did they know that Louisville was going to be awful? Of course not. They expected to play a 7-5 or 8-4 kind of Louisville team like we typically get. But Alabama's premier game should not be against the 7-5 Louisville team. And then they schedule two FCS teams, and then they schedule a group of five who's typically not good. Yes.
Correction.
Sure.
3, because that homecoming game.
They played 3 FCS this year?
I guess it is too, but they play that late towards the end of the year. They play that homecoming game against one of those FCS schools.
James, believe me, I have torn the SEC to shreds in the scheduling department. Anybody who doesn't schedule Power 5 teams or schedules a light touch like Alabama is next year with Duke. What is I have no issue with Alabama playing Duke. They go ahead and play Duke, but you should be playing somebody else. You should be playing Duke and Penn State, or Duke and Oregon, or Duke and fill in the blank, Texas, somebody else of your caliber.
And I'm going to tell you something else too. Before recent years, Georgia, it came out, Georgia went 20 years before they played a non-conference game out of the Southeast. It had been that long. And like you said, the SEC, for all the props that they get, they do not travel. And Saban, what I don't like is for a team that's supposed to be the #1 ranked team in the country every year, is the fact that they play these neutral site games. They will not travel. I don't like, and it's not a neutral site game if you're playing in the Georgia Dome.
No.
What is that? And then they played, and then a few years ago they played Wisconsin in Texas.
Exactly.
That's not a neutral site.
No.
Wisconsin had to come almost 2,000 miles. They had to go all the way to Texas, and Alabama only had to scoot 2 states over. So you're getting a northern team to come all the way south to play a team in the dead heat.
So James, to your point, if you're going to do that, do it the way LSU did it. They went to Lambeau, and then Wisconsin came down and played at Reliance Stadium in Houston. So at least they played neutral sites, but they played one in the north at Lambeau Field, which was great. It was an awesome spectacle, Lambeau Field, Wisconsin, LSU, and they played the year before at I believe it was 2 years before, and the Alabama game was in between. But anyway, they played in Houston. So do it that way if you're going to stick to these stupid neutral site games. There's too many of them. Play at the other stadium.
But I'm saying, give Ohio State some love. Okay, Jim Tressel once said this.
Yes.
When he was coaching. Jim Tressel said, "We will play anybody, anywhere, anytime. We don't run from nobody." And what did they do? They played a home and home. This was under Jim Tressel. They played a home and home with USC.
Sure.
They played a home and home with Texas.
You understand that I know all this, right?
Oh, okay. I'm just clearing that up.
I can recite Ohio State's non-conference schedules. Believe me.
Yes, we did a home and home with. We just recently did a home and home with Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
We did a home and home with Cal. I mean, come on now. Ohio State is the only school in the country.
You lost me with Cal.
Country. Well, wait a minute now. We played Cal. Listen, look this up.
I don't need to look it up. James, for those people that are watching, that have been watching me for a long time, they know I don't need to look this stuff up. Go ahead.
No, okay. Do you know who the starting quarterback for Cal was when Ohio State played him?
Well, he's playing for the Los Angeles Rams right now.
Okay, so what are you talking about, Cal?
Well, that doesn't mean just because they had a pro quarterback doesn't mean that they were any good. How many games did they? You know that Jared Goff went 1-11 one year in college, so it doesn't mean that the rest of the team was any good. And I'm going to liken that scheduling to Alabama, scheduling Duke. I don't have an issue with Ohio State scheduling Cal, but schedule somebody else too. You know that. When is Cal ever 10-2, 11-1? Never. So they're going to be 7-5 or 4-8 or 1-11 one time. But yeah, Ohio State generally schedules very well. They've got Notre Dame and Texas coming up here in the next few years, but they evidently couldn't find somebody to play. And Tennessee and Oregon, home and home.
Yeah.
So some really good games. Absolutely. Virginia Tech, they obviously played a home and home with them in 14 and 15 as well. The point of that.
And look, we lost to them. Frank Beamer come out there and run he come out there and run a defense, the 85 Bears defense.
Yes, he did.
He ran the 46 defense on them, and they put it on us, and we still won. We rolled our games and won a championship.
That's right. On poor JT Barrett, who was just starting his second game after the game against Navy the week before.
Okay.
James, I hope you've at least caught on, even if you don't agree with me, I hope you've caught on in watching me after a month that I'm at least I do my research and I know who plays who and I do follow it pretty heavily.
Well, I like you because you're impartial.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You have to be impartial. If you're not impartial,
I try.
You know, you have no taste. So, but thanks a lot.
Thank you, James. Again, I was just making the point that they're not playing anyone this year. And Cincinnati's a very good group of five, but that shouldn't be their best game.
Right. I agree.
They probably, I'm not saying Ohio State's dodging anyone because obviously that's not their way. They don't do that. They probably just got into a bind and everybody else was taken and they couldn't find anyone to schedule. That's why, and I've explained this, James, and probably way before you started watching, I've done videos on this. I would take all scheduling out of the hands of the schools. It would be completely ripped away from the schools. And there would be a committee and a formula that would spit the schedule out. And I've explained how I would spit the schedule out, and it would be equitable for everyone.
And do you know that Nick Saban scheduled Georgia Southern the first year that they entered the FBS? Georgia Southern. And the only thing, now listen, I'm not knocking Alabama, but the one thing I don't like is they need to stop giving them the get out of jail free cards and backing them in the championships. You know, like, you know, they're not winning their conference and they just getting the free pass and they just backing in, you know, instead of, you know, allowing other schools more deserving to get in. You win your conference, you get in, and they get to get out of jail free cards and they get in. Now, and this is another thing. Now, I'm not knocking Alabama's history and what they did. I'm not knocking that, okay? But look at the championships they won under Saban, okay? 2 of them was against rematches. Dude, they played LSU and they played Georgia. That's a rematch. That's 2. Then they played
the Georgia game was not a rematch.
Well, no, the Georgia game was not a rematch.
No.
I take that back. Okay, they slid in there, but okay, but
I'm going to catch you on these things.
They got the rematch. Yeah.
Go ahead, James.
And then you got Notre Dame, which was just like the Clemson game. It was like playing a team that was running in quicksand. You know, there was a slow team in Notre Dame. And then they played Texas. Colt McCoy went down on the first series.
But they can't help these things.
Compete against them.
James, they can't help that the quarterback gets hurt, and they can't help that Notre Dame is the team that's scheduled to play them. They can't do anything about that. Now, if your team would have chosen to take probation and miss a bowl game in 2011, they might have been eligible in 2012 as an undefeated team at 12-0, and they would have been playing Notre Dame for the national title and probably kicking the crap out of them.
I don't even feel good about beating Notre Dame. It's not. It just doesn't fit. Just doesn't fit. It's like beating up on some Division II school or something. I don't ever feel good about beating them.
What's funny, James, is a lot of the things you're taking me to task about is stuff that I have ranted and raved about many, many times. So this time last year, after leading into the college football playoff selection between Alabama and Ohio State, as you well know, after Ohio State beat Wisconsin to win the Big Ten and Alabama was sitting at home against Auburn, I railed against the committee. I could not have ranted and raved enough. I made video after video just going crazy. And I took so much heat from 90% of the live chats and the comments about what an idiot I was, that I didn't know that Alabama was this great, blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to explain to people it has nothing to do with how good I think Alabama is or is not. It has to do with win your conference, and that while Ohio State was being completely annihilated by the media and by fans, and obviously by the selection committee for losing that horrible game against Iowa, and I agree, that was a horrible loss. But if you're going to take that criteria, you need to not have a double standard. And the double standard is that Ohio State's excellent resume of wins, plus that Michigan State annihilation of 48-3 over a top 15 Michigan State team, Alabama didn't have one of those. So while everybody was screaming, Alabama doesn't have a loss like Ohio State, 55-31, well, Alabama also didn't have a win resume like Ohio State, which included a 48-3 win over a 10-3 Michigan State team. So I was going crazy this time last year about all that.
Well, and then another thing too is when you're talking about Alabama and those wins. Now, the thing that I don't understand, what they need to do is just get rid of those conference games. Just get rid of them, because if you're not going to respect them, why have them?
Absolutely.
If you're going to play those conference championship games, just get rid of them.
Absolutely.
Because Ohio State has won it 2 years in a row, and they've been on the outside looking in. So why play them?
Why play them?
And, you know, and another thing, if you pay close attention, now the SEC plays those FCS schools. They never lose points in the standings for playing them. Why is that? When other schools are playing, now I thought when you're going by a point system, quality of opponent and the quality of win is supposed to carry weight. So if you're playing an FCS school, which the SEC schools do, in late November when other schools are playing conference games and they playing those homecoming games and they playing those FCS schools, they never lose points. In fact, they gain points. It inflates their lead. When Alabama plays those FCS schools, it inflates their lead in the point standings when they bring out the new polls the following week. I watch closely about that. And another thing, too, on those recruiting rankings, too, which is kind of really, I think the average fan don't understand those recruiting rankings, too, is that they do go by the quality of the player, but they also go by volume also. Because if you look at where Ohio State was this year, they were like, I think, 12 or 13. Okay. But if you look at the quality of the player, they were in the top 3.
Yes. I'm well aware of that.
16 players, and Alabama recruited like 26. And how is it that they can recruit 26 players every year? And they turning all those guys pro, and some of those guys, a lot of those guys are coming back. How in the world are they able to recruit 26 players?
Well, come on, James.
Gray shirt.
They're not. Nobody's cheating when it comes to roster spots. So they all play by the same rules. It just has to do with that's one of the reasons why Alabama had the 6th rated class last year, is because they had a low amount of signees last year. So that ebbs and flows for everyone.
Okay. That's fair. I can accept that.
Man, James, you go on about Ohio State and how I shouldn't say that I've been unfair, but some of your first comments were kind of amusing, because I'm just thinking about all the the arguments that I've had and the rants that I've had in the past that I think you would have supported, but you missed those. So you know, I'll leave you with one more. In 2015, I thought that Ohio State was rightfully left out of the playoff because they lost to Michigan State head-to-head. They did not win the Big Ten. However, in the last couple of years, we've heard all this best team business. Who are the 4 best teams? Let's just get the 4 best teams in there. We don't care if they won a conference or what they did. Well, there's no doubt in 2015 that Ohio State team was basically an NFL team, that they should have been in the playoff. If we're just selecting the 4 best teams, then they should have been in the playoff. And the only thing that separated Alabama that year and Ohio State was that Ohio State just picked the wrong team on the schedule to lose a game to. Alabama had the same record as Ohio State, but Alabama lost to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss just turned around and started losing other games. And actually, the only thing that kept Ohio State out of the playoff and put Alabama in the playoff in 15 was that the dumb Michigan punter decided to catch the football and throw it up in the air, if you know what I'm referring to, the last play of the Michigan State game.
I couldn't believe that.
That seemed like the funniest thing to Ohio State fans at the time because they didn't understand what was going to happen a few weeks later. That game put Michigan State in the Big Ten championship. Otherwise, Michigan State's got 2 losses, and Ohio State goes to the Big Ten title game, and they win, and they're in the playoff. The exact opposite happened in Alabama's favor. Ole Miss would have gone to Atlanta to the SEC title game because they had the head-to-head win against Alabama, but they went to Arkansas, and in overtime on a 4th and 22 play, Hunter Henry throws the ball over his head because he was falling out of bounds, and that was the only way to save the game. And it got kicked around, and Alex Collins picks it up and scores this ridiculous touchdown in overtime that sent Alabama to the SEC championship game. So these crazy things happen that people don't remember.
I'm a dog in memory, and I know one that I know you don't remember.
Oh,
Alabama,
you're sure about that?
When Lane, okay. Alabama was playing Tennessee.
Okay.
They was playing Tennessee. Lane Kiffin was the coach.
Mm-hmm.
His father was the defensive coordinator. Saban, going into that game, he told his players, although Tennessee didn't have that great a team, he said, this will be the hardest game you play all year. He said, because this will be because of the defensive coach on Monty Kiffin, it's going to be like playing an NFL game.
Sure, it was like a 12-10 game. Something like that.
Right, okay. So
yeah, I remember it. Terrence Cody blocked a field goal to win the game.
No, wait a minute now.
Okay, go ahead.
You're forgetting the detail. You're leaving out the detail on that particular game. Okay, because this is how Saban won his first championship with Alabama. Okay, at that particular game right there, Tennessee had the game won. Okay, listen closely now. They were on like the 30-yard line, and the referee threw a flag, and they called a holding call. They showed that replay because they called out the number of the player, and they called a holding call. They showed that play about 10 times. He let the player get by him. He didn't even grab him. They called a phantom hold. Now, the guy kicked the ball and made it. He made the field goal. When that referee threw that phantom flag down there, backed him up 10 yards, the trajectory, of course, the further out you go, it lowers the trajectory on the kick. And because he backed him up another 10 yards, it was just a little bit too far out and lowered the trajectory on the kick, and he got it blocked. Had that referee not through that, and I'm telling you, it was a phantom flag. They showed it. The announcers couldn't believe it. They showed the replay about 10 times. He said, man, where's the hold at? He let the player by. That play catapulted Alabama to the championship. Had Alabama lost that one game, they never would have won. They never, not that year anyway. It was a phantom flag that made their season. Yes. I remember that game like yesterday. The guy kicked the field goal and made it. And they said, wait a minute, it's a flag down. He called a holding call. I couldn't believe it.
So, James, you're going to appreciate my series that's going to be like 100 videos long, but I'm going to go through every year of college football, starting with 2018, and I'm going to go backwards, and I'm going to say, this is the team that won the national championship, but what factored into that? And are there any other teams that could claim a national championship, or in this era, at least claim that they were deserved a college football playoff appearance? And we're just going to go year by year by year and dissect it.
Okay. That's fair enough.
All right, man. I appreciate the call, James. You have a great night.
No problem.
Thanks
You
for
too.
jumping on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right. I have been behind this mic, sitting in this chair since 6:30. So I appreciate you guys jumping on here and enjoy the college football talk as always. So again, the audio you can find at Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. Just search Mark Rogers TV. Support the channel. You don't have to throw us money. What you do is you go to any of the description sections of any of the comments sections, any of the video description sections. Just grab the link, the Amazon link, do your Amazon shopping. You don't have to buy the product. Just help us out there. We've got our newsletter. Just sign up by sending your email address to mine, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Just send your news up. Man, it's late. Send your email address to mine, MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and I'll get you the newsletter. We're going to have the next one released tomorrow. Otherwise, they are delivered each and every Monday. All right. Anything else? I thought it would be fun to have a live stream just celebrating Clemson football. So you Clemson fanatics out there that watch Mark Rogers TV on a regular basis, let me know. We got Clemson alum 98 and DeAndre for sure that I know are Clemson fans, and I would put you on screen and we'll yuck it up and you guys can brag about Clemson football. All right. Other than that, I am going to find out the last time that the Gators, the Florida Gators, played it out of, and I saw Uncle Lou on the line. Maybe he knows this. The last time the Florida Gators played an out-of-conference game outside the state of Florida. It was, I cannot remember them playing. When have they ever played a team in the ACC? It would have to be an ACC team if they ever have. It certainly wasn't a Big 10 or Big 12 or Pac-12 team that they ever played on the road outside the state of Florida. When has this ever happened? I'm going to find that out. I'm going to look that up. All right. Again, you can help us out on the super chat right here. Just throw us a buck or two here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And if you had any idea what is going on with my channel right now and the situation regarding the channel and the shaky ground and the thin ice that we're on, you may throw me a buck or two. Anyway, we released our top 25 that actually makes sense. Check that out. And I promised in the comments section there that I am going to respond to every comment. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do a video in which I go through all the top 25 comments back to me because I saw a number of people who were a bit misguided. And so I'm going to respond to everyone who commented to the top 25 video that actually makes sense. And the national championship game, we had a number of videos in response to the Clemson win over Alabama. I saw a number of comments there that I thought were fairly amusing. So I thought I would respond to those. So starting this Friday, I am going to cut a viewer comments video responding to your comments, not from the live chat because I missed those, but from the comments section of any of the videos. And of course, I'll get to as many as possible. The funnier they are, the more they rip on me, or they have to be very, very football insightful. If you want to go that route, boy, the bar is high if you want to go the analysis route. But if you want to go the amusing route, the comedic route, or just blast me and rip me, which I find pretty funny, you can go that route as well. And most likely that will be your route to get your viewer comments reviewed and commented back from me. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, we've done about as much damage as I possibly can. So again, in addition to the 2 hours right here, we've got an hour of live stream over at my Miami channel. I'm going to move those videos over to here, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, right here on the channel you're watching. So don't worry about that. And we talked to Michigan, Ohio State, Miami tonight. Those videos are going to be released very soon. And again, NCIS Fanatic 21, I hope you're still on the line because, and let me know if you're still on the line, just say hi, and hi to James as well. If Ohio State wins the championship next year, will you eat a Carolina yeah, who? Okay. NCIS Fanatic 21, if you're still on the line, I would love, because you have asked for this more than anybody, but other people have. Okay, still here. I am going to go through every season, starting with 2018. And I'm going to go back every year, 2017, 16, 15. And we're going to look at who won the national championship, supposedly, who won the national championship, who was left out of the playoff, who had a meaningful, reasonable, valid argument to get into the playoff. And then, especially as we get into the BCS era, it's going to get really mucky and dirty and nasty. And we're going to really mix it up and enlighten some people into what could have been selected that would have made sense and how stupid and idiotic these systems are in college football. The college football playoff, yes, it's a better system than the BCS only for one reason, that it affords two deserving teams that have earned the right a shot at the national championship. That's the only thing that makes it better than the BCS. And we will rip to shreds the BCS year by year by year. And then we'll go back before the BCS in 1997 and before and analyze the national champions to see who really earned national championships and who awarded themselves. And this is only an example. I'm not picking on Alabama, but who awarded themselves national championships at times that did not earn national championships. All right. So I have promised this. Now I got to deliver. So we will get that underway very soon. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you received one. I think it was the last one we delivered about 10 days to 2 weeks ago. You may want to look at that one if you don't look at the newsletters. Maybe you've signed up. We've got about 100 people on the newsletters, but you don't look at all of them. You may want to look at that one. So there's somewhat we'll call it confidential information regarding the channel that we're not at liberty to talk about right now. That's pretty crucial to the life support of the channel as we stand right now. All right, everyone. I appreciate the support. It's great talking college football. If you commented at any point in the live chat something that you want to get to me, want me to respond to, I can't obviously go through the live chat while I'm talking all the time. So please leave your comments, your requests, your suggestions, your questions to any of the comment sections in any of the videos, and I will find it at some point here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm not going to say another word the rest of the night. I've been talking for like 6 hours straight. So we will see you soon right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please, again, support our channel by going on the description section of any of the videos. Pull the Amazon link. Do any of your Amazon shopping right there, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm going to give the live chat another look right here before I sign off. I'm trying to respond to a few people that I've never seen on here, like James Warner. Cheryl, thank you so much. Cheryl's been joining us for the past few weeks and been on here a lot. So thanks for the support. Yeah, James Warner and a couple other people I've never seen on here. So thank you so much for the support and the kind words. And we will see you guys soon.